Welcome to the University of Michigan Dentistry Podcast Series, promoting oral health care worldwide.
The dental degree, your biggest asset in obtaining financing for a dental practice. We'll discuss this and other aspects of obtaining a bank loan on this edition of By Design.
By Design, a look at the changing scene in auxiliary utilization, business office procedures, facilities design, and contemporary trends in the management of a modern dental practice.
Financing is a major consideration in the establishment of a dental practice with a sound financial base. Here to give a banker's point of view is Mr. Donald Gruhl, Second Vice President and Loan Officer from one of the major banking institutions that provides dental loans in the state of Michigan. Don, is it true that the dental degree is the recent graduate's major asset in obtaining a loan?
Well, Joe, it's a very important aspect to consideration of the new graduate. Our particular institution has been loaning to the dental profession for over 25 years. Our experience has been excellent. And obviously that degree holds a lot of value, not only from day one he steps out, but for the future years, and especially in the very near future. And our bank has been able to offer some of the most competitive rates, as well as some of the best flexible repayment programs, as well as quick professional service. That's our earmark.
It seems like what has taken place over the years, just in talking with people, is that years ago, a physician or a dentist would graduate. It was sort of his ticket to financing without any question. Is that still the case?
Well, we find, especially in the Detroit metropolitan area, that dentists do excellent. They seem to be able to pick up their customer base quite readily. There seems to be a real need for their particular type of services. And fortunately, we are able to provide the tailor-made loan package to meet their particular needs right off the bat.
It seems like with the escalating costs of dental education today that students are dollar-wise even more in debt when they graduate, either because of personal debts or student loans and that sort of thing. How much does that influence the student's ability to borrow?
Well, having been a long-term lender in the field, we realize that the student coming out of school may have a large amount of debt accumulated. This sometimes ranges from $10,000 or more. But once again, realizing the ability to quickly build a customer base and get a quick return on the particular practice, that doesn't hold or is not a hindrance to the particular student at our bank.
So your history of loaning and repayment has been favorable from the banker's point of view in terms of dealing with dentists in the state?
That's very true. Our delinquency and our write-offs have been very minor.
We've gone through a tremendous variance in the prime rate on a national basis. Our economy here in the year of 1980 is a rather troubled economy right now. How does prime rate and the current economy influence dental loans, or does it?
Well, there's a number of factors that go into into determining a longer-term rate, which we consider a dental loan to be. Obviously, prime rate does have a particular type of influence. Prime rate is generally best reserved for the short-term borrower, the large, highly rated company. In terms of the 5-year money or 7-year money that the dentist is most prone to utilize in that, there's other factors that come into play on this. There's other types of money instruments. There's other kind of costs that we have to look at. Prime rate does play a particular variable there, but every banking institution or lender has to look at their various costs at any particular time. Thus, the rates will vary from time to time. It's important when the particular student graduates from school, in the sense that it may be a low rate, it may be a high rate. A year ago, the rates were very low. This past year, we've gone into a bizarre type of economic situation where rates have been very high, not only for the short-term borrower, but for the long-term borrower.
Is there a formula that you can cite if the prime rate is, take a figure, 18%, what would be the interest rate on a loan for a dental loan of 84 months or whatever length of time? Do you have a formula that...
Well, there is no particular type of formula because every institution is going to vary in their particular costs. Obviously, we look at our particular Fed fund rate, where the banks normally borrow money. We also borrow money through various savings accounts. You have to blend this together with the money that is on deposit through demand deposits, other type of checking accounts. So every institution varies. So there's no one particular set formula. But normally it might range maybe a point or a couple points above the prime rate at a particular time. We're going to be looking at our marginal costs, and prime a lot of times is a good indicator of what marginal costs may be. Prime is normally based upon 1.5% over the average commercial paper rates. And this is usually established by your New York banks. Thus, we may be over that or we may be under it. In the past, we've been both ways. So prime isn't always an indicator because it's a short-term variable. We have to look at our long-term rates, and we want to stay into the market because we feel very confident with the particular dental profession. So we don't want to price the new dentist or the dentist that starts after a couple years of associateship out of the market.
I'm interested in what areas you will help a dentist finance within the practice.
That's one of the major keys that we feel that we can offer the dentist, is that we want to put him into the office completely. We want to be able to finance his equipment, his instruments, his supplies. We want to look at his leasehold needs and his working capital needs. Every dentist is going to vary depending on what situation he goes into. It could be a strip store, it could be an existing practice that is already fixed up in terms of the plumbing, the electrical, other leasehold improvements and that. Thus, it's going to vary. But we try to put the dentist into practice day one with all his needs taken care of within certain parameters.
All right. I'm wondering, when you're talking about providing funds for these particular areas, capital items, leasehold improvements, so forth, do you have any kind of formula that if the dentist is borrowing a given dollar amount, is there a percentage that you will allow for leasehold improvements, a percentage that you will allow for operating capital?
Even though every situation is different and we try to tailor-make our loans, we tend to find over the years that 70 to 75% of the dentals or the dentist's needs should be major equipment and instruments. After that, the balance of the loan should be within the supplies and the various improvements that may need to be done in the office, and maybe a small proportion, up to 10% or so, for working capital needs.
Do you find that 10% for working capital or operating capital is adequate for individuals? I don't know what total amount we're talking about that dentists are borrowing to start out today. What would be a typical amount that dentists are borrowing?
Well, a typical amount, if I had to use an average, maybe $60,000, $65,000. Now, when I say typical, again, it depends, again, whether the dentist is going into an established office area or he has to do a lot of improvements, as I mentioned earlier. But we structure our loan in terms of repayment that the need for working capital is minimized. And due to the minimization of working capital needs due to the structuring of the loan, we find that our particular formula seems to work out fairly well for the dentist. Now, if it doesn't work out quite in that sense, then we're going to ask the dentist to do a contribution in terms of down payment on the particular loan. Or we may ask for additional guarantors to shore up the particular type of loan.
What kind of a guarantee do you ask for in a normal loan situation, the typical case?
Well, the typical case is that the dentist will be guaranteeing the loan. Obviously, we have an individual that doesn't have too much prior history of borrowing. Normally, maybe a credit card or just under student loans. Usually hasn't started repaying this yet, and thus the risk to the bank is quite high. Of course, when you talk about a secure type of loan, our major security would be the major equipment, and we're loaning money above and beyond our collateral values. Thus, we have to look sometimes to the individual or some other outside guarantors to shore up the loan. Once again, every individual, every situation is different, and we have to look at the needs of the individual.
Do you require credit life insurance?
Normally, there is life insurance required on a particular loan for, in case of death of the proprietor, that the bank would get paid.
What about disability? If a dentist gets in an accident, skiing accident, can't practice, can't
Normally
make
that
loan
is,
payments?
normally that is part and parcel of the insurance policy that the individual does get, and we also require insurance on his equipment. Thus, in case of a fire or some other theft, whatever, that the bank would be paid as well.
You mentioned that dentists are borrowing typically in the $60,000, $65,000 range. I assume that that's for rented space, some degree of leasehold improvement money required.
That's correct.
It's not a purchase of a building, obviously.
That's right.
And I assume that that's for the basic office, business office area, support areas, and one or two operatories, are we talking?
It's normally 2 operatories. And
So a starter office.
A starter office, that's
Yes.
principally it. We find that usually meets the needs of the dentist in the sense that he can afford to repay the loan under a reasonable structured repayment program, but yet it gives him the ability to grow later, assuming that he does have additional space in that office, which we usually advise him to do as such. In other words, he'll have the facility ready in terms of plumbing and electrical, but he will not have any equipment in that particular office. Thus, as his practice grows, he can expand accordingly, and once he has established a repayment record with us, that would obviously help his ability to obtain additional funds.
Do you find that recent graduates tend to overextend themselves in terms of trying to obtain financing for their practice, over-facilitating their dental practice?
Well, Joe, we do find that graduates sometimes have different aspirations that they're looking for from graduation time on. We find the dentists coming in to ask for 6 operatories, financing for 6 operatories, or we find the dentist that comes in and asks for 1 operatory. That is the benefit of our experience that we can offer to the dentist in terms of what the normal amount of need should be. Obviously, at the bank, we have certain parameters that we're looking for in terms of what we can offer the new dentist. And we have to be able to provide this to him as well as what he can pay back under reasonable terms. And we will indicate to the dentist what these normal terms should be. And if we can't meet that person's needs, then we will tell that person accordingly.
And they'll make other plans. I'd like to talk about terms of loans at your bank, the current situation in 1980, and I'd like to talk about the method of securing that loan right after this management fact. Don, let's talk about terms that are available in now the fall of 1980 that are available for students' loans, payback rates, that sort of thing.
For the new dentists in this particular year, which is an unusual year, we are restricting our repayment program to 5 years or 60 months. In most normal years, they usually can be extended to 84 months. In terms of rates, for the new dentists coming out of school, the rate is approximately 14.5% over the 5-year term. Let's take a typical example. A $60,000 dental loan could be repaid over 60 months. The first 3 months, we offer a complete deferment, no payments at all. The next 9 months, he would pay interest only. And starting the 13th month or the 2nd year, he starts making repayment of the total principal and interest. In terms of specific example, as I said, the first 3 months, no payments. Months 4 through 12 would be approximately $970, and
That's interest only?
that's interest only.
Okay,
And
on
starting-
$60,000.
That's correct. And starting the 13th month through the 60th month, he would be repaying $1,655 a month. The key here is that the dentist has his most difficult time building his practice the first 9 to 12 months. And with this particular deferment, the first 3 months, and the reduced payments the next 9 months, it helps him meet his particular requirements personally, as well as meet his other staff needs, and helps him build his practice on a very comfortable level.
How flexible are these terms? Are these absolutely fixed terms, or are there some circumstances under which these can be negotiated, a little longer deferment, or maybe extending the 3 months to 4 or 5 months?
Normally, we have found that this program works quite adequately for the dentists in the past who have done quite well, and we find that this is a program that we stick to. Obviously, if a dentist does get into some kind of difficulties at the bank, we're always willing to look at a reset if necessary, or find some other means to help him meet his particular requirements. Very few dentists aren't able to meet the requirements of this particular structured program.
Do all banks follow a similar formula?
Every banking institution is different. Some banks understand the needs of a dental practice, some banks don't. As I said earlier, we've had a long-term experience with dentists, and we feel comfortable with the dentists coming out of school. Most banks are going to look for a longer-term track record. Banks are known to look at a longer term of repayment and ability to meet requirements to other institutions or other lenders prior to providing funds. That's where it comes into the aspect of the 5 C's of credit. We're looking at the individual's character. We're looking at the capital needs of the practice. We're looking at the collateral needs. We're also looking at certain conditions. We're also looking at the capacity of the dentist to practice. These are 5 C's of credit that we look at. In the case of the new dentist coming out of school, we emphasize that degree, which comes into the capacity. He has an ability to earn a lot of money down the road, and his character are 2 important ingredients that are emphasized perhaps more so than the other 3 ingredients. Of course, collateral is a major ingredient with this.
A moment ago, you said that in stating your example, that the beginning practitioner, fresh out of school, sitting up in office, had a certain rate and payback schedule. Mm-hmm. Does this imply that there's a different arrangement for a veteran dentist that's, say, expanding their facility, or maybe has practiced in one city and is starting over again in another city? Are there different arrangements for veteran dentists than there are the beginning dentists?
The only thing that may differ is the rate. We tend to give a half-point rate difference to the established dentist that can bring in his statements and show that he has so-and-so earnings based upon so-and-so volume. He's built up a established customer base, so there's no question on the repayment. Thus, we feel it's necessary to provide him with some type of benefit in terms of rates.
Let's talk about the steps that a recent graduate would go through to obtain a loan. Step by step, what do they have to do?
Normally, we find the student that is near graduation, perhaps 2 months or so, and he starts to visit some of the dental houses and talks to the dental salesman concerning a location of a practice, and compiles some type of estimates on what his major equipment needs will be, his supplies, and his instrument needs. At that point, the new dentist will give us a call and we'll set up an appointment. Prior to us setting up an appointment, we will send him an application form, which will basically lay out his name and address, various characteristics about his past. We also will ask for a personal statement at that particular time. A personal statement will disseminate his assets, any liabilities, namely obligations under student loans or credit cards, whatever he may have in that particular nature. We also will ask the doctor to prepare a pro forma. A pro forma is a income statement that will help the doctor plan for his needs over the next year or 2. The reason that we do this is that we want the doctor to sit down and realize what his staff expenses will be, what his overhead expenses will be, this meaning electrical, water, other utilities and that, and what his repayment requirements will be. Once he looks at his various expenses on a month-to-month basis, he'll have a better idea what kind of earnings he needs to generate from month to month. Under our repayment program, which defers payments for the first 3 months, this helps his working capital requirements tremendously, because he doesn't have the outflow of funds during that first 3 months. He can start to build his customer base. As the third-party payments start to flow in, he can build his income before he has to think about any repayments at all. So the application, the personal statement, the pro forma are 3 vital things that we need to have in our possession.
Are people pretty good about that, pro forma? Do they
sometimes,
are they well organized and looking at their practice as well as their personal needs and bring that all together for you?
Sometimes the dentist can do this on their own. Some of the dental houses provide this service, or we will also provide assistance to the dentist. We have a lot of requests in this particular field, so we don't have the time to take to help him prepare that pro forma, but we will assist him in how to structure the particular needs of the pro forma. But this helps the dentist think out his particular needs and requirements and starts orienting him as a businessman and not just a dentist. And this is very important to the new graduate out of school, because he doesn't always realize the requirements and or the needs of a particular practice until he starts looking at the numbers, and helps him organize in his mind the demands of the particular profession he's taken on.
What's the next step?
Next step then is to have the interview with the particular dentist. Once he's prepared these particular documents, we will interview the dentist at our office and discuss his particular location, find out why he chose that location. Did he do some type of study? Did the dental house provide some assistance on why that location is good versus another location? Here we're talking about big city versus small city. Is it a community that has many dentists or fewer dentists? We want to find out why he chose that location, and next we're going to find out how he's going to go about building that customer base. This gives us a lot of insight into his prior planning for his particular needs in the office. Once we've established those particular points, we'll discuss his application, we'll discuss his personal statement and his pro forma, and then try to tailor the needs of his loan at that particular time. What we do after he leaves the office is run a credit check on his particular experience borrowing in that, which is usually quite limited, and then we hope to get back to the dentist in a matter of 48 hours on our decision.
Does that decision come after the graduate has in fact graduated, or can this process take place sometime during the student's senior year, maybe in the last semester, remembering that there's graduation requirements that have to be met, and then state board licensure before any of this business of actually producing dentistry and subsequently income could take place. So is there a time requirement there?
There's no time requirement. We have some dentists call us beginning their senior year, and we encourage them to wait till they're closer to their graduation date. As far as being approved, that is no problem prior to being licensed. We will provide a commitment letter to the dentist, which usually runs 60 days, and this can be renewed. The key we're looking for prior to closing the loan is that the doctor is established in his office, has passed his boards, is properly licensed, and that's when we're going to disperse the funds. So
don't you run into the problem, Don, of individuals wanting to take a rented facility and have the leasehold improvements done so the office is ready at the time that they are in licensure? Do you ever release a part of those funds for leasehold improvements so that if they take 2 or 3 months of time to prepare an office, they're going to need funds to have that, so that sometime in June when their license is back in their hands and ready to go, that the facility is also ready?
Precisely. We will loan up to 10 to 15% of the commitment to the dentist for leaseholds. Once again, it would depend on whether he has to have a contractor go into his office and construct walls or floors or whatever the needs may be, versus the dentist that may be going into an established office that doesn't require these particular construction aspects completed. So we will provide that particular dollar amount and to the dentist, and we haven't run into situations where the dentist hasn't completed his license and gone on to practice.
Then the rest of the money for this case that I indicated to you would come at the time of licensure and
That's
the
correct.
person's ability to practice. I'm wondering, one area that you hadn't mentioned in terms of financing is the situation where a student would purchase a practice, maybe sometime prior to graduation, and we hadn't mentioned the goodwill factor. You talked about capital items and leasehold improvements and operating capital and that sort of thing, but you didn't mention the goodwill in the case of someone purchasing a practice. What is your policy relative to goodwill?
That's an interesting situation that you mentioned, because we find that very advantageous in terms of our consideration for a loan approval for a new dentist to take over an established dentist practice, assuming that they pick up a customer base. And obviously this is very helpful to the new dentist, because he can generate more income immediately if he's picking up a number of patients from the previous dentist. Of course, it varies. Sometimes the previous dentist will take his patient base with him, sometimes he won't. In terms of goodwill, we may loan up to 5 to 10% of that particular practice. Once again, we will evaluate that practice. Where is the location, which is very important to him building his practice? What is the number of patients that he hopes to be able to assume from the old dentist, and what is the value of the equipment?
You look at the financial statement of that practice? After all, it belongs to someone else.
We normally encourage the acquiring dentist to procure income statements from the prior dentist, because that would help us evaluate what earnings were accumulated before in the practice, and it also helped the new dentist to have some idea of what his potential, at least starting potential, should be. And we also encourage him to review the customer records in that, if he can. After all, he's buying the practice, he's paying a certain amount of money for this, and he should know. But essentially, talking about goodwill, we don't expect to pay too much on this. Sometimes the dentist, if he does have to pay a substantial amount, will work out a repayment program with that dentist that is selling the practice to him.
On a separate note basis?
On a separate note basis.
I see.
That's correct.
We've gone through the application, the pro forma development, you've interviewed the individual, and now we're at the point of loan approval, 48-hour period you could release the funds. I assume the next step is that the funds are released when the practice can be started in terms of legally, the person is graduated, licensed, ready to go. When does the period of time of repayment begin? Is it immediate upon disbursement of the funds, or at the beginning of the month that you're in, or is there a critical time period there?
If the doctor procures an interim advance, that would normally be done on a 90-day note and be picked up with the balance of the loan when he's ready to close on a major portion of his loan. That's usually when his equipment is installed and he's ready to practice. The time that he closes his major portion of the loan is when we start the repayment, in sense of he does have a deferment of 90 days, so he has no payments at all for the first 3 months. So it's actually starting the 4th month, but the time ticker is going at that particular point. I think it's also important to indicate, too, that at the time that we approve the loan and provide the doctor with a commitment letter, we also state in there requirements of that particular loan. Essentially, we're asking for the collateralization of all his assets to be in his business, whether it's a sole proprietorship or a corporation, and we ask for the insurance policies, which we mentioned earlier, the loss payable clause on the contents insurance, and an assignment of life insurance policy. Those are 2 primary things. And we also ask for, or state in there, the requirement of any guarantees if those are required at that particular time.
Since this is a major decision of a recent graduate, do you have any wisdom that you'd like to pass along, any words of advice to the recent graduate in establishing their financial base?
Well, I think it's important for the recent graduate to look at his own abilities and talents and evaluate whether he wants to go into practice himself at that particular time, or perhaps associate with an established dentist. Associating with established dentists provides him the ability to look at how another dentist actually operates his dental practice in terms of the business side of it as well as the professional dentistry. And that seems to be a wealth of knowledge that can be afforded to the new dentist to do it that way. We also have found from our sense of approval that when we have someone have perhaps 2 years of experience with another dentist, he picks up a certain customer base and he comes to us maybe with 100, 200 patients and indicates that he wants to set up his practice not too far away from that location, and that tends to increase his ability to be approved for a loan at our particular bank.
Does that hold true for other banks, do you think?
Well, there's no substitute for experience. I don't care what field you're talking about. When you have shown and proven yourself out there in the business world and indicate that you can earn a certain amount of income by your tax returns, which the bank would ask for, this shows a lot of goodness to the bank in terms of the capacity of this particular professional to earn a living. He's been successful because he's proven himself. So that's an important thing to look at. But then again, there's opportunities for the new dentist right out of school sometimes, and it's important that he gets the properly structured loan to meet his needs. Go back to tailoring of needs all the time, because you don't want to become overburdened with debt that you're worrying about paying your bills as opposed to practicing good dentistry. And historically, there have always been good opportunities in the metropolitan Detroit area for starting a new practice. And so it's important that I mentioned to the dentist that he has to evaluate whether it's good for him to start by himself. Does he have the confidence and the experience, or should he get that other experience with another dentist? Other things that he should consider too is the importance not only of a good bank or lending institution, but he also should look towards the proper legal advice, whether he wants to set up a corporation at this time. For instance, he also should look towards the CPA who can organize his financial records, report to the bank. He can also set up an accounting system within the bank to make sure that he's collecting his receivables on a proper basis. Very crucial for him to rely on this CPA and the attorney to provide the proper tax advice that he may need down the line. And of course, since we require various insurance policies, it's also important that he finds the proper insurance agent to meet his needs there. The key is that if you go out on your own, you are a businessman, you're not only a dentist. And the key is you have to look to other professionals to give you assistance. And that is your banker, that is your CPA, your attorney, and your insurance man. Very important for professionals that can aid you
Can you
in
help
being
people
successful.
with that?
Yes,
Joyce?
we provide assistance in that particular area if the dentist requires it. We will offer a few names of people that we've found that have a lot of experience with the dental and medical profession, and if that assistance is needed, we will provide that.
We've been talking about loans. You're centered in Detroit, in the state of Michigan. Does this encompass dentists all over the state of Michigan?
Yes.
It doesn't make any difference whether someone's in Marquette or Escanaba or whether they're in Southfield or wherever?
Our policy is that we will loan to dentists throughout the state. We find that most of the requirements, or most of the people that do want our particular financing packages tend to be in the metropolitan area. Obviously, a lot of our sources come from the dental houses. We deal with all the dental houses in Michigan, and they tend to give us a lot of our leads, as well as through various public speaking engagements. In that, we find that we have the dentists or the new dentists calling us as well.
Do you provide loan service for dentists that are going to practice out of the state of Michigan as well?
Our financial institution is a major regional center that operates within Detroit as well as Michigan. We do not provide loans for dentists outside the state of Michigan because we don't know the particular regions that they're operating in, as we do know the Detroit and outlying areas.
Thank you, Don. Our guest has been Mr. Donald Gruhl, Second Vice President and Loan Officer from a major Michigan bank. Join us for other programs in the By Design series that reflect current topics and trends in the management of a modern dental practice.
You've been listening to a presentation from the University of Michigan School of Dentistry, which is dedicated to supporting open learning and open educational resources. This recording is licensed under the Creative Commons. It may be reused and redistributed for nonprofit use. Please attribute materials to the University of Michigan School of Dentistry and redistribute under this same license. For more information on how this and other University of Michigan School of Dentistry recordings may be used, visit www.dent.umich.edu/license. Listening to a presentation from the University of Michigan School of Dentistry, which is dedicated to supporting open learning and open educational resources. This recording is licensed under the Creative Commons. It may be reused and redistributed for nonprofit use. Please attribute materials to the University of Michigan School of Dentistry and redistribute under this same license. For more information on how this and other University of Michigan School of Dentistry recordings may be used, visit www.dent.umich.edu/license.